So we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming. So first thing you should know about this session, we're trying something new. So we have set this up through Periscope. So right now we're trying to live stream this to folks who are not able to be with us in Manchester, and also ones who are going to other sessions so they can see this after. So just know when we turn over in terms of the Q&A and what we say, we're all trying to get this as much information out as possible, okay? And there's a couple seats up front, right there. Thanks. My name is Rich DeCapua. I'm the Associate Dean of Students at Boston College. I'm also the Regional Director. And this session came together pretty organically in terms of a perceived need that we thought we would have in the association. And of course, with all of you sitting here right now, filling up one of our largest rooms, this is an obvious need that we have to have a discussion about. So I want to give an opportunity for the three panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Alex, please.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Kamal. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Activities and Leadership at Babson College. I am also the GLBT National KC Co-Chair-elect, so I'll be taking over Kevin and Madeline in March of 2016.
Hi everybody, my name is Constanza Cabello. I go by Connie. I'm the Director of Intercultural Affairs at Stonehill College, and I serve on the Latino Knowledge Community in regional and national roles.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shea Gregory Poku. I work at Northeastern University as the Program Director of the Social Justice Resource Center, and I'm new to NASPA.
Oh, welcome.
So thank you all for coming. So we're going to start off with just some questions, some points about Missouri in particular. So one thing that we had a conversation, the four of us had breakfast yesterday and said, how are we going to do this? And the four of us fully understand that this could turn into a very organic type of program. People want to voice opinions, they want to ask questions. So we're going to start it off structured, and if it ends up being unstructured by the end, that's totally fine. This is an opportunity for all of us to kind of think as professionals about these issues. So you could go from Missouri to Yale to any other institution of higher education and really start talking about those issues. We wanted to really focus on the issues of Missouri. And if anybody has read anything about that, we all know that this incident in particular was a very slow burn that was decades in the making, really, when you looked at the history of the institution, going back to a campus climate survey they put out in 2001, back to hiring a chief diversity officer in 2005, to curriculum not being changed, to training not being implemented, all the way to the Black Lives Matter movement and to where we are right now. So there was no one issue that happened. This was many, many years of issues that encapsulated in what we are now seeing in the resignation of the president and the chancellor. So the first question, going to Connie, is, in your opinion, because Connie talks to a lot of her colleagues across the region, what is the climate on campus right now in terms of Region 1 New England about these issues?
Sure, I think first and foremost what comes to mind is that folks are lost and scared. I think there's a lot of people who want to do the right thing and have no idea how to get there. And so that seems to be a common theme, is that folks want to have the conversation, they want to have the dialogue, they want to support students, but they don't know how to put that in practice. And so that's what I'm seeing a lot of. And the other piece is fear, in terms of folks not wanting to say or do the wrong thing. They don't want to be perceived as quote unquote racist or not supportive. And so I'm seeing that a lot on campus as well. But beyond that, what I'm seeing is that our students are scared, right? And so as administrators, we're scared, but students are scared. I think for me, what I've learned the most is out of this Missouri situation is that inaction is action. And so we're sitting on our seats kind of waiting for something to happen. And so folks are scared because they don't want to do or say the wrong thing. But beyond that, what concerns me is that we're so focused on ourselves as professionals that we're forgetting about students. And so we have a lot of scared students. We have a lot of students who are waiting for action. And so those are probably the two themes I see the most. It's just this fear and this confusion about what to do next, and ensuring that the risk is minimal.
So a question to really anybody is, the use of social media in any of these movements is now becoming one of the driving factors of what's going on. So many of us who are in metropolitan areas, certainly around Boston College, during the Black Lives Matter movement, we would see our students engaging on campus and also off campus, because they would get tweets, and so they would get information that way. Can anybody talk about the use of social media in terms of what they're seeing out there and how students are engaging with that appropriately or inappropriately?
What I will say is that I think think that social media plays a really big role in the sense that it creates a sense of community for students, and it also really tends to inundate students with messaging that they don't belong. So what you'll find developmentally is a lot of students realize that they're having these individual experiences of feeling alienated and feeling marginalized and potentially being harassed and microaggressed. But when they find out that this is the same thing that's happening on a campus nearby, a campus 200 miles away, it really compounds a sense of frustration and also the need to feel like they need to act and act immediately.
Yeah, also I think social media is, things are happening live. So a lot of these things probably have happened in the past, but because of the communication process over the years, so sending a letter rather than an email, or making a phone call from your rest hall rather than a cell phone. I think these issues probably haven't happened for a while. The situation just makes them greater because it's happening right away. Something happens right now, it will be live tweeting in 2 seconds. So I think the ability to kind of pass that information right away is critical, and it also helps, but it's also sometimes damaging because then people are getting facts from people everywhere, and rather than getting the information right away, it's just assuming things based on what they read or see.
And yeah, one other thing that I'd add is that unfortunately social media is not the forum to have these kind of conversations, and that's what happens, and that's something I would say is probably one of the most destructive manifestations. You can't have these kind of intense personal conversations unfacilitated. You just absolutely can't.
And not in 140 characters. I'll add that as well. So some of us might be following SH Chat, and so if you're looking at some of the conversations that are happening there, they're painful conversations. We're seeing a lot of things on there, or I'm not on Facebook, but on Facebook I'm hearing in some of our groups, these conversations are getting nowhere. And so some people are really working through things publicly, which is one way to go about it, not a way I would choose to do so myself. But it's also causing this disconnect, and we're not giving folks an appropriate avenue to explore these topics in a way that's healthy or constructive. And when it's so public, it actually is exactly what you're saying. It's making people feel even more marginalized, more oppressed, because I know I've read things and been like, whoa, is that what someone really thinks? But I don't have the opportunity to engage them in a conversation right there. I can send them a direct message and do all that, but it's been, in my experience, more harmful.
And it's not just about students. I mean, we've all been part of just like professional-based groups on Facebook and Twitter, and some of those, you think that people take time to think about what they're gonna write, even if it's professionals, administrators, like the Student Affairs Facebook group. I'm sorry to put it out there. Some of the things is just unbelievably insane what's written by people that are supposed to be taking care of our own students.
So on Sunday, the Regional Advisory Board had their meeting. We started talking about these issues, and here are a couple of the issues that came out of that I'll reflect back to. And at this point too, as we kind of go, if anybody else wants to comment outside of the panelists, please just raise your hand and we'll get you a mic. We also feel this is a time that as professionals we have the ability to talk to one another about this, because we have our own personal views on all of this. Then we're asked to manage these things on our campus. And then even beyond that, we have very young staff members who are trying to figure out their identity within all of this, and how do they navigate themselves through social media and wanting to actually join their students on campus and be helpful to this cause. One of the, I think, salient issues that came out of the advisory board meeting was the sense of fear from student affairs professionals of doing the wrong thing and being put in the middle of trying to advocate for students, but also being at odds, not directly with their president, but really at odds with the philosophy of what our role is. Some administrators think our role is to just quell the students and make them behave, and we can't play both sides of that, right? So we have to make sure we have our own integrity, but also work with students so they believe in us without it also getting too big, right? Because if it gets too big, then we get the other side of it. So I'd like to know, and again, after the panel, anybody else who wants anything, working with students today in 2015 in these issues, how do we get them to work together within the bounds of the campus? What does that look like?
So I'll share a story that happened actually at this conference. And so I was at the SALT conference, and I was working with the Pathways to the Profession program. And so going around the room and talking to undergraduate students about their experience and what they're looking to do. And after the session, I had a Black female student come up to me after, and she said, I just want to talk to you about what's going on my campus and get your insights. And I said, of course. And she sat there and she said, you know, I'm a black student and I want to join up with our black students on some of these movements, but I also believe in working within a system that I know wasn't built for me, and I know I need these people to get me to my next step. And I sat there and I was like, whoa, because the truth of the matter is we can't put students in these situations where they're choosing between their racial identity and the affirmation and support of administrators. That is, and we do it all the time. Honestly, I do it all the time. Folks in this room do it all the time. And so I had a good conversation with her about it, but the truth of the matter is I didn't have any great answers for her. And beyond that, I had to give her the unfortunate truth that if she's looking to go into this field as a woman of color, she's gonna have to make the same decisions as an administrator. And that for me was really reflective in thinking about how are we preparing folks to, one, go into the field, and two, straddle that line of administrator and person of color. I don't want it to be one or. I think that we need to do a better job at engaging, because we have professionals of color, particularly our black professionals, who are in pain right now and struggling. And we're putting a lot of the work on them to figure out these issues. And that's not okay. That's really not okay. And so I'm thankful for my white allies and accomplices in the work who have stepped up and really said, we want to work with you. But as administrators, I think one of our greatest challenges is that we've been trained to put out fires. Right? That's what we do in student affairs. We put out fires. There's a leak in the building. We'll call facilities. Students have homesick. We'll get them connected. Counseling services. We're trained to put out fires, and these are not fires that have quick fixes. And so I think we really need to be comfortable in those spaces of working through issues that are not putting out fires that are going to take 1 hour of a session and sitting with someone and then they feel great after. People need to be okay feeling crappy. We need to be okay having these conversations that are going to take work and time. So I don't have a great answer to that question, but those are some things that have been stirring around in my mind since I've been here.
I think the only thing that I'd add is that I'd underscore that point about how people of color, in addition to black staff, are just overtaxed. It's not just the emotional, worried about your own personal emotional safety as you work through these issues. Students of color will come to you. The Chronicle of Higher Education November had an article about the invisible labor of professors. It's true for student affairs professionals as well, trying to provide that support. And the reason why students don't feel safe on campus and kind of get to the point where you have Missouri situations isn't because of the Black Cultural Centers on campus. It isn't because of Latino Cultural Centers on campus. It's because there's not a larger scale commitment to making sure that diversity is something that we're looking for as a competency from all of our student affairs professionals, so that everyone is well versed and prepared to serve all of our students.
Show of hands in the room, whose home campus had some type of event in terms of a protest or solidarity with Missouri? Raise your hand. Does anybody want to comment on how that was on their campus, how it went? Do you like? Yeah, I'll give you the mic.
I need mic.
Okay.
So my name is Ashia Richmond. I work at Westfield State University. I'm a residence director and oversee living learning communities. So we, as our first year having a Black Student Union, and our Black Student Union decided to have an event, like a rally in solidarity. So it was basically last minute. They texted me at 11:30, we're doing this. I'm like, okay, let's try to figure this out. The president needs to know and all that. So we got it together. Faculty and staff came out and it was great, and we sang together until they picked up Yik Yak. And I think that the faculty at that point and staff didn't realize that we're a reflection of the nation. You know, like, we're in Massachusetts, so liberal, you know, until they read the comments on there. And then they realized that, yeah, our students are crying every day. The reason why they flood my office and Dory's office every day, because they feel this from you, microaggressions, as well as the students on campus. So the words were not pretty. I will not repeat that. But in that moment, I really, it's like, it's an aha for my campus. Like, so we, the few people of color on our campus, like the administrators, we can't do all the work, and we don't have all the answers. I felt like people in that room were outside kept asking, like, so what should you do, and what are you gonna do next? And I'm like, why do I have to do it next? I'm tired, I live this, I have to work it, I gotta go to sleep to this, I gotta wake up to this. How about you pick up a book, you know, Google something and figure out how to help, so that way it doesn't all fall on our shoulders. And I would say the best thing about that is that we didn't put out that fire. Like, they ignited the fire themselves, and I put more oxygen to it to make the fire bigger, because at the end of the day, I know that I'm an activist myself. So I think I shouldn't lose that that fire within me because of where I work in my job and be afraid of what my supervisor's going to say. So I think, just to comment what you said earlier, you know, I think when the students have that fire, take that risk and embolden that fire within them, and make sure that maybe it doesn't go ablaze and they start burning, flipping cars, but continue that fire, because it's really important. Sometimes the students touch me in ways that I forgot that I had within myself. And I think that at Black Lives Matter protest or rally or stand in solidarity was wonderful and exactly what I needed to just refuel me for next week to continue to have these conversations, whether I want to or not. I feel like I'm obligated to, because I'm a woman of color on a predominantly white campus. But it was a great turnout, so yes, or 6 of them.
Yeah, she did need like it. Yes.
How's everyone doing? I'm Joseph. I attend the University of Rhode Island CSP program. It's not my home institution, but it's an institution that I'm interning in currently. It's Brown University. Brown University had a protest themselves in which administrators and also students were able to kind of rally up. Many allies, many students of color were there. It was enlightening to see. For the most part, there was an incident that happened in that time where there was actually a supervisor from the residential halls that was identified as someone who wasn't someone that's an ally at all, and was actually called out in the middle of that protest, which to me was very like, now administrators really need to understand that students, their power, they're understanding what their powers are, they're understanding that they have this ability to like now have ownership, now have complete ownership of what they want to see from their university. And then just hearing the stories of students talking about going to an institution built on the backs of slaves, them identifying as Black students, they don't even have that respect. They don't see people of color around in an elite institution, so it was concerning. Another thing that happened directly after that was actually a teach-in that was held by the students of the Africana Studies, which was enlightening as well, and at least for myself as a growing professional, one of the things that one of the doctoral students said that really made me self-reflect about myself and my identity as a person of color was the reason why Black Lives Matter is such an important thing is because if this is successful, this means that this is going to pave the way for every other person of color. Like so the civil rights thing, that like if it wasn't for civil rights, I as a Latino wouldn't be able to go to the universities that I want to go to. I wouldn't be able to go ahead and speak in this way that I am right now, and speak with confidence, but speak about how we still need to have ownership on us as professionals and how we have to help out. And how I helped out simply was by just being there and comforting my students, like comforting the students at the Brown Center for Students of Color. I was there, I gave them handshakes, I commended them for their courage, and I was humbled by their courage, because it was something that, if it was in my shoes, I don't know if I would have had the same courage to do it. So I commended them for it, and I was just there for support. But that's what we were doing at Brown.
Thank you.
I actually want to correct something, sorry Joseph, he's actually an intern in my office. But, so he said that there were a lot of allies, he said there were actually a lot of allies at the demonstration. There actually wasn't that much. One of our students actually called out that the same type of people, the same type of administrators were there. It was the professionals of color. The students were calling out, it's the same type of people here. People of color, and they're only administrators of color. Where are the white administrators of color? Where was the president? Where was all that kind of stuff? They need that support. They're tired of the same people who can't really make any, they can say stuff, but they can't really make a decision. So they were frustrated with the fact that, yeah, the same type of people, we need support. They were sitting in front of our university hall where the president was, and they pointed out people in the window who were just staring or closing the window because they didn't want to hear stuff that was going on outside, kind of thing. And I was just frustrated with that. And something that to add on to what we did as a center was be able to, I got hot chocolate for them because they're outside in the cold. But then I also did a community care meeting the day after for events just to come together as people of color, to process things, to talk things out. And that was a time for them to also think about the next steps. What are the demands we need? What are the next steps that we need to take in order to move our campus to be somewhat inclusive? And yeah, we're brown, but we have a lot of issues. We had a lot of issues in the past, from the rape light protests to our student newspaper article about Native Americans should be proud that Columbus was here because they brought goods. It was an exchange of goods. No. It wasn't that way, kind of thing. So a lot of things happening on campus, and our center is trying to do the best we can to support those students who've been affected by all the issues going on. So community care has always been something that's important within our department.
Thank you very much. One more.
Something that my name is Ruth Lorette. I am the interim director at Providence College for the role of cultural education and programming. Something that stood out to me because we did it a couple days ago, it was at midnight, and everyone kept asking why at midnight. There was no reason, the students just wanted it that way. And it was a great thing to see so many administrators and staff that were there to support. But one of the students had a poster that said, Father Shanley, why now? Father Shanley is the president of Providence College, and he was there in attendance. But it was a valid question, and some people were upset. But one thing that I tried to remain mindful of is allowing the students to make sure that it's their voice being heard. I think one thing that I had to check myself and remind myself and had to speak to other administrators was to make sure that we allowed their voice to be heard. We had our time during our undergrad to be part of whatever movement we wanted to support, but make sure that their voice is being heard, make sure that their demands are their demands, not us clouding their judgment and filling their minds with things that we think would work for the campus more than what they think would work for the campus.
Thank you all for sharing that. And actually, that brings up a great point to reflect back is, it seems that we're at such a precipice right now that if you haven't been engaged with students on your campus in some way, but then you try to become engaged, there's the possibility of the backlash because now you're only here because the news crews are here and because this is trending and now you're on campus. And so these individuals have zero credibility with the students, but they're the ones ultimately making the decisions. So, you know, going back to our panel, who's going to solve everything for us, right, by 10:15. Very easy. Got the president of NASPA, Kevin Kruger's here, right? So there's no pressure. We got to wrap this up by 10:15. What are some things that you think that would be helpful for this group or anybody at this conference to be doing when they go back to their campus in terms of boots on the ground work with students?
I think that my education for social justice education came from Wesleyan University, a very liberal school in Middletown, Connecticut. So what's happening around the country just happened here. Everyone who spoke was a person of color. We need people that are not us to stand up for us because white people have the privilege and power for people to listen to. So if you think about it, I mean, I'm not saying like you have to speak because you have to be able to do that, but I think one thing that came out of our regional board is that you need to be ready for being uncomfortable. There's going to be fights. There's going to be, and I'm not talking about physical fights, I'm talking about arguments. There's going to be confrontation. And I think allies are important for you to feel comfortable with that. Because again, it just happened in the last 10 minutes. It happens everywhere around the country. We can't just be us because then we become the angry brown people on our campus that want to make a change rather than these administrators that are trying to make good. They don't see us as that. They see us as angry people that we need to make sure because it affects us. So what I'm saying is, white folks, speak up because that's where change could potentially start. That's what we need. So I just needed to point out the dynamics because I was just like in my chair. It's like it needed to happen. So think about it. It just happened here. Does it happen on your campus? Just a moment to reflect for that one. Sorry, that was not part of the question.
You're fine, Alex.
Sorry.
I'll add on to that. So this concept of allies is really complex, and that could be a whole other session, so we won't go there. But truthfully, yes, I need allies, but I need accomplices. That insinuates that people are risking with me. And so I think it's really easy to be in your chair and be like, how can I be supportive? Which again is there's a comfort level there, right? It's what can I do to ensure that you feel good at the end of the day? But what I'm really looking for is people who are going to say, this is going to be challenging, sticky, frustrating, and risky work, and I'm in it with you. And so I think we really need to reflect on what is our intent with naming ourselves as allies? And allies are great and wonderful, but I want accomplices on my campus and in the region and in the profession. That's what I'm looking for. I want people who say, I have something to lose, because people of color are risking every day, in every email, in every meeting, in every tweet, every status update, we're risking every day. So I want people who are going to risk with me.
I think it starts with naming the problem, which is oppression. And starting from there and recognizing that even though as universities and colleges we're not responsible for systemic oppression across the world or even across the United States, we do have an obligation to protect our campus climate, and we need to take the onus off of students to be able to have to advocate for their rights. Like, we know already that there's not enough support for our students of color. We know that. So what are we doing? What steps are we taking so they're not being at the, they're not having to take on the emotional energy of having to defend themselves and prove that these incidents are happening to them and that they're suffering from them. That's unconscionable. Like, I want to say that again, that's unconscionable that we put that on our college students to have to do that, to prove that they're in pain. And I think we need to take seriously the issue of belonging and the sense of security that they're not feeling on our college campuses. If any of you are adherents of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know right after food, clothing, and shelter, it's security and it's a sense of belonging. And security is about like seeing more than 3.2% of Black tenured professors. It's about seeing more student affairs professionals of color, and not just student affairs professionals of color, but those who are actually in decisions and working collectively and collaboratively with other administrators to make positive changes that actually speak to the needs that they have as students. That's so important. And I think we also need to be thinking about what kind of diversity education program we're doing for students. I know a lot of us do it orientation, but what happens to a transfer student, right? Like, they're not getting this stuff. So we need to make sure that we're really thinking about what's happening in terms of how we're educating students and making it, again, that a priority, because microaggressions do have an impact, right? And these students are coming to the university with the brand promise that they belong and that they'll bleed whatever color your institution is. Mine just happen to be red and black. You know, go Huskies. They want to believe that they belong there, and they have a right to feel like they belong there, and their needs have to be taken as seriously as, you know, a physical trauma or a physical impairment, and it's not. Yeah.
If you don't know what to do, just ask, how can you help, right? I think that's the most important. People could assume, like, I want to do this, I could do this. Ask your students, how can you be, you know, comfortable with you? Ask them what they need from you, rather than the assumption that, okay, well, if I go out there and just stand next to them, that means I'm supportive. No, talk to them. They'll tell you what they need. So it's so simple as that. If anything, if you don't know what to do at all, you're not ready to like fight the battle, you're not ready to like go there and be that person, just ask. Just ask.
And I would echo that too, because a lot of times we ask our students of color, but look at the other white accomplices on your campus and how they're putting practice in there. And NASPA, I'm just saying, I'm not really sure how to engage in this right now, but I want to. And so, can we brainstorm? Can we grab coffee? Can we grab lunch? Because I think the other part is that we can't continue to put our students of color in positions to educate. We do that all the time. And so, in our cultural centers too, I mean, I oversee an intercultural affairs office, and I understand in my role that's part of my position. I'm happy to do it. But I can't be supporting faculty, staff, and students in 1 hour. And I think we need to better kind of infiltrate the system with folks who are having these conversations. And the other piece I wanted to talk a little bit about is that, you know, 5 years ago, many of us in the room didn't know very much about Title IX. And we demonstrated that we had the capacity to learn, we had the capacity to form collaborative community responses and proaction to really delve into these complex problems. And we found resources somehow. We made it happen, right? We learned. And so many of us in the room can now say that we know what Title IX is. But is it going to take a Dear Colleague letter for us to address racism on our campus? That concerns me. That really, really concerns me. And so I feel like we need to think about that. We have resources. There's tons of literature out there. Your campuses have libraries. There's a lot of books, YouTube, Google. Start educating yourself. I mean, there's tons of resources out there. And I'm happy to share some of my own. And so I think being able to take ownership over our own learning is critical. And we need to stop waiting for it to happen, because I don't want another Title IX Dear Colleague frenzy. I don't want that around race. We're setting ourselves up for huge harm, not only for students, but for our college campuses.
So I've heard a number of complexities in this conversation, and certainly we talked about institutions being institutions of oppression in many ways, but they're also historically active in this way for hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, institutions have been around for so long, and you know, outside of any of this, to get anything to change at an institution, just in general, that has none of these complexities, takes a very, very long time. So that means that you need very nuanced professionals to be able to kind of move this conversation forward. And certainly what came up at our advisory board meeting and at breakfast yesterday is, do we have leadership? And I'm not talking BPSAs, I'm talking campus leadership, that have the cultural capacity to actually have these conversations, to actually lead within this space and actually move something to a place where it needs to go. So with that, I kind of want to call out any older voice.
Here's
Oh, that was bad. Cut that off, Periscope.
Veteran.
Seasoned professionals who might want to give a more historical context of what they've done in their role. Peggy?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment two things. So I'm Peggy Jablonski. I've been a vice president at a couple of places and on the NASPA board several times. And your past regional, like Rich here. I was sitting here feeling like I wanted to give the younger professionals and professionals of color the space to own this workshop. And so that's why I didn't raise my hand before. And I think from a place of compassion, we need to be careful about judging each other as to when we participate or when we don't, because I'm petrified about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing right now. And I am a complete accomplice ally, and that's why I picked troublemaker and put it on my badge. So please help us and be compassionate also when we're struggling to how to speak and help create the environment. So that's my other point. All of us are going to go back to campuses and be involved in helping create these environments to have the conversations. Some campuses are bringing in outside facilitators. Some people, like the University of Kansas, are putting their African American chancellor as the facilitator. How should we be helping structure the conversations? If anybody in the room has ideas about that, or the panelists, that would be helpful.
Hi, Kevin Kruger, President of NASPA. Just a couple observations. Just thought. The first is, I think we're at a place where we're trying to give a voice for the lived experience of our students. I think that's really important. I think that's something that Student Affairs actually is good at, and I think in many cases that's one piece. But there's so much when we get past that. It's really about resources and institutional priorities. You mentioned how we funded Title IX. I think that's going to be the real difficult work. And I just came from the APLU meeting, which is the land grant meeting for land grant institutions in Indianapolis. And two observations there. One is a lot of presidents are moving to, if they haven't already, hiring a chief diversity officer. I worry that that's a little kind of window dressing sometimes because they don't resource those departments and they don't have the staff to implement something. And I think that, so I'm not saying chief diversity officer is a bad move. It's just that if that's a symbolic thing we do, I think we're moving backwards in some ways. And I don't think that most presidents have the cultural kind of competency to which is why they're so afraid. And if you look at the national statistics, if you exclude minority-serving institutions, there's only 9% presence of color in the country. So we have a huge pipeline issue and leadership issue in terms of providing that kind of representation, clearly at the faculty level and also within student affairs as well. So I think but somehow we have to get, obviously today it's about the lived experience of students, but we have to get to the structural pieces, the resource pieces, both within student affairs and outside of student affairs. And so, we're certainly interested in kind of leading that conversation. But if we just talk and we don't do anything about it, our students will end up in 5 years in the same place they are today. So somehow we have to think about those resources. And you're right about Title IX. There's some interesting parallels. One of the parallels is when, if you remember back when the first Dear Colleague letter came out, you couldn't get a college president to talk about this. They were petrified about saying something that would be victim blaming or whatever. And we're in the same place right now. So we need really institutional leaders to be sort of out front publicly and saying some things that that resonate with our students. That feel like, okay, I've been heard. So I really didn't solve anything. I just wanted to kind of acknowledge there's some really good things out there, but it's got to be about resources and how we commit institutionally.
Anybody else want to make a comment? Sorry. Anybody else want to make a comment? Yes.
I think to respond to, I'm so sorry I missed your name.
Peggy.
Peggy?
President. Okay.
Oh, don't call me Madam President.
No. I wasn't sure. But
I'm just me. I'm just Peggy.
If I can call you Peggy. We are also afraid.
Yeah.
And understand that people of color are able to tear each other apart too if you say the wrong thing that we don't agree with. So I think that don't think when we stand up here and we say these things that we're not terrified. Like, I'm also terrified. I said where I worked for, so when he looks this number, hopefully he still wants me to work for him. But we're also scared, but we feel like we have to. And sometimes, even if it's the wrong thing to say, the fact that you said something or did something makes that total difference. Because in that moment, it becomes an educational moment if you said the wrong thing. And you might say exactly what individuals need to hear. I think sometimes when the university sends these emails and stuff, we're over the emails. We want to see you.
Yes,
we want to see you come down from wherever you were and descending from the heavens and come down to the cafeteria and just be there. And even if you're just listening or you mess up and say the wrong pronoun, it doesn't matter in that moment because we needed you there. And I think that's the best way to help, is literally coming down and say, hey, you're struggling. How can I help? Removing all titles and say human to human, how can I help you? I might have said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing, I truly apologize, but let's work together to figure out how we're going to fix this as an institution. And I think that's the best way to move forward.
And the best conversations I've had with folks around these topics are conversations that start with, I don't know how to best say this, and this is, so if it comes out of my mouth, this is just how it comes out. Right. You can add a little disclaimer in the front and just say, I don't have all the answers, I don't know everything. And who is an expert on all this stuff? Nobody. And so, to folks who are in those senior level positions, I'm not expecting to be sitting down with anybody who's an expert or has all the answers, because if somebody had the answers, we wouldn't be here right now. So I think just being authentic, we talk about authenticity all the time in this field, and engaging in dialogue that's authentic and real, and we need to be able to have those conversations with one another and know our limitations and express those limitations. I certainly don't know it all. And I don't expect anybody else to. And so to be able to add those disclaimers in the front, just saying, I don't know how to best say this, or I don't know enough about this particular topic, but I want to engage in the conversation, goes such a long way.
So going back to that point, I remember what happened in the fall of last year after the events in Ferguson, and then all the events that happened after that, were many institutions sending out many emails trying to address this. And many students of color were having none of those emails, right? Because they've seen those emails before. Anytime I read or I hear about these kind of focus groups happening on campus, going back to, it sounds like window dressing to me, let's get everybody in the room who's angry, let's de-escalate them, and then by the time they graduate, we'll be on to a new population, we'll be kind of done with this. So after all those emails were going out, then you might not have the capacity to have the conversation, but anybody in a senior student affairs position or president has the ability to be compassionate when people are suffering in this way. And it's not hard to figure out that these students are suffering outside of any issue that they're talking about, that they are hurt and they need help. So the bottom of it all is we can be caring for one another, and that will solve a lot of what we do. But most people they're compelled when they hear the word race to shut up. Right? They don't know what to do after that. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to use their capital on campus. They don't want to see it decrease. And I really think that there is fear of what senior level administrators will do in terms of what the board will say, what the president will say, and what those actions will be after. But one thing that has happened now is, and all these emails are starting again, right? You see them all coming out. Now, student demonstrations on campus have turned from demonstrations to demands. So that has been a new thing that we've seen now. So not only are we going to demonstrate, we are going to issue these demands. And many of the demands that we talked about yesterday at breakfast are things that really student affairs has no control over. Talking about or dissecting a Eurocentric curriculum is not something that the student activities department is going to do, right? So what do you think are ways, back to the panel, working with the academic folks, working with other folks around campus that are outside of just with students, that will help move this initiative forward?
So, yeah, I think I've spent more time with faculty this semester than I think I have with any other population. And so I think one big piece is that the key to multicultural confidence at the core is relationship building. And so we need to be, and we're good at relationship building. That's what student affairs people do. We're friendly. Everybody knows us. We laugh. We're the people that build relationships. And so I think that we all need to be intentional about the relationships we're forming. Because the truth of the matter is, if I didn't have a relationship with the dean of faculty right now, I could not march into her office and say, "Girl, we gotta talk. Close the door." I mean, and we're handling some real life issues and some immediate issues. And the truth of the matter is that those relationships are so critical. And so if we're only going to our colleagues in other divisions in crisis, that's not going to work well. And so I think really being smart about getting together a coalition of folks on campus where you can kind of talk and mention these issues. And it's not just in academic affairs, right? It's our folks in athletics, if that's not in your division. It's our folks in auxiliary services, it's the president's office, it's admissions, it's enrollment. It's all these folks that can't be just out of student affairs. And you know, the truth of the matter is institutional diversity truthfully just never, it doesn't come out of student affairs alone. It does not come out of student affairs alone. And so we need to be thinking about ways in which we're institutionalizing diversity practices, and we can be part of the conversation, and certainly we can help coordinate and organize because that's what we're good at, right? And so I think being able to develop those relationships and provide those avenues and start the conversation is really important.
Yeah, I would definitely add, I think the relationship building is important because these are human-centered issues, but I think we need to have competence, right? Because at the end of the day, good intentions is just the road to hell. Like, I'm just going to say it's the road to hell. And we really need people who are nice, but who actually know something and have taken the time to educate themselves about what, you know, Black history actually is, or what, you know, queer history actually is, and to expect that of people. But I think even if we're not willing to have the conversation and we don't feel comfortable in having the conversations, we can institutionalize and mechanize safe spaces where we're saying to our students, we're creating avenues for you to have coping measures, right? Like, not to use violent metaphors, but when there's campus shootings, there's intentional emails about this is the kind of support resources we're providing to you, these are the counselors, these are the kind of spaces we are creating for you to be able to cope with these real life traumas. We don't do that, right? We're not doing that. We're not creating those kinds of intentional spaces.
And when we do, it's the diversity office, right? And so let's be honest about what we do in those situations is that we direct everybody, oh, go to the cultural centers. But really, we should have a list of resources that transcends diversity offices as they are. I mean, we need to have counselors in counseling that know how to address these issues. We need to have faculty members. We need to have multiple resources to be able to do that. And I think that's one of my frustrations with the campus emails that go out. It's like, it feels like the copy and pasted email, we just took out a couple of sentences and then we shot it out there again. And so I think we just really can do more work on that piece.
Yeah, I want to say real quick. I think another thing I want to point out too that's really critical is, like, my background is actually in international development and international conflict management. So I'm new to working with college students in particular as a population, but I'm definitely really used to talking to disaffected populations, right? The difference is those populations picked up a gun. And what I need to say very clearly is that I think a lot of people feel frustrated with our college students because they feel like with them getting irate, they're opting out of the process. The truth is, them continuing to make a list of demands is actually them saying, I'm still here and I still believe that there are people at this campus or in this institution who are actually going to listen to what I have to say, right? And so I want to make sure that we say that even though they're crying, and even though they're suffering, and even though they're frustrating and they're protesting, they're still engaging in a democratic process, and we can't lose sight of that.
So a couple of things that we probably can do as divisions of student affairs going forward is looking at the cultural competencies of your staff across the division. And I'm calling on my own personal experience here, and I'll call out Jacinda and Jesse, who I worked with for a number of years in Suffolk, who were the director, of diversity services, and they were the director of diversity services, they were the college counselors, they were the career development specialists. They became the de facto place where any student of color would go to get all of these services because they didn't feel comfortable going to other places or had misconceptions of what those places looked like. So when we're talking about students who are suffering, who need help beyond just the diversity or the intercultural center, there needs to be competencies across the counseling center, career services, everything to work with those populations to make them successful, especially when they're engaging in demonstrations like this and things are affecting their lives, right? Their academics, we need to support them. The other thing that I think we need to look at are, how do you address bias incidents on campus? How do you address microaggressions? How do you get people on your campus who may not even believe in them to maybe be trained to believe in them, right? And when somebody says something to you when you're affected in a certain way where you get shut down, that you can't expect the student's response to be, oh, I'm just going to kind of, pull my boots up and just kind of walk away, proud of this, or be able to engage in a conversation, right? Because I've talked to people on my campus and say, well, if somebody says something, negative towards you, you should just be able to, have a conversation about that. And I said, well, it's a little different when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you have a group of people who are drunk shouting things at you, right? You can't really address that. So what do we do on campus to hit on those two things? And we're at the point now, we've got 15 minutes left, and I'd like to reflect it back out to the group for any statements or questions. Lori? Yeah.
So I'm Lori Sadako at the University of Maine in the Wellness Center. One of the things that I just want to say is that, and this is probably something that everybody knows, but I just need to say it out loud. I think there's a real danger of throwing solutions to problems that we don't know what we have. We're programming for the sake of programming. So, like starting where we start in public health with problem analysis and a cultural assessment, so we're actually looking to solve a problem that we have rather than looking at what everybody else is doing and trying to do the same thing. I see a lot of that happening. Oh, they're doing this, so let's do that too, and we should do that. Well, what are your problems? Do you know what your problems are so that you can actually solve those problems? I mean, it's a standard public health, approach, but I don't think that we're doing that on all of our campuses. So, need to say it.
Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Martin from Boston Conservatory. One of the things, so I wanted to come here because I know our students this week are doing a bunch of activities and trying to engage in conversation. But one of the things, I got a text message before I came here from a colleague that said, if you know anybody who sent emails out against their upper folks kind of wishes, please help me connect with that. Because right now I know there's campuses and colleagues that I've got that you can't point out what's going on because if it's not a problem on our campus, let's not make it a problem on our campus. Right, it's still a thing that's happening. And so trying to find ways to navigate that, like our SGA took the lead on putting a bunch of things out there because further up it was kind of a, what do we do? How do we, I looked at my SGA, I was like, what are you all, what are we gonna do? Let's do something. And so now we've got a whole league of things, but there's still colleagues that are in places that want to support, want to do things, want to take the risks that our panels were talking about, but are being explicitly told that we can't. And that's weird, while I might not get fired if I send an email out to my entire campus, that's definitely something that might be negatively looked upon later. And you gotta be, we're trying to find the ways to engage in that. So if anyone after this is over has conversations about how you manage that, I know my colleague would be very interested in that as they were texting me, please live text me this and let me know what I can do to help navigate some of these situations. Because we're trying, but some people are being told explicitly you can't do this. And that's a challenge.
I think ultimately education is really important when it comes to these issues, the situations, understanding, like I said earlier, Google, read a book, talk to a colleague, be part of a conversation, get into a discussion, go to a class, participate in something. See, at the end of the day, I think that's what you need to do in order to be able to do these for other people. Education, educate yourselves. That's really, really important.
Yeah. Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Edward Henry. I apologize for those behind me. I'm a career advisor at Mass College of Pharmacy, just down the road from Northeastern. I have similar problems with the conservatory in that our upper administration refuses to acknowledge multiple problems with their student body in regards to anything beyond getting them into a seat. Once they're into a seat, that's it. So student debt, mental health issues, and anything and everything under that umbrella. So in the Career Center, we're very much front line just in terms of how we sit on the campus. So we get all of these issues and we don't know where to direct them because we're trying to get them jobs, which is a very, well, sorry, that's a different discussion. But my thought is, why can't we come to this together? We have professional associations. Is this something that NASPA could take a lead on and try to get either regional or a national initiative getting together that can train us as student affairs professionals? So we do have that self-education component, but we also have more of an organizational push so that we can kind of find ways, if we're stuck in a situation, we need to act more individually as opposed to more of an institution.
Yeah.
Dennis Camacho, Mass College of Pharmacy, Dean of Academic Support Services, university-wide. I came into this workshop, not knowing what to expect like many, and I'm pleasantly surprised because there are two things that I personally would take away from this. Number one, without knowing everyone in the room, and I'm a Latino male, just to disclaimer, without knowing everyone in the room, I know a lot of folks in the room, I'm pleasantly surprised to see that a lot of people have their toolboxes open. We just don't know how to fill them. Even us, the people of color, we do not know how to fill them. Because as President Kruger mentioned, and has been mentioned by some of the senior admins, this is a larger issue than just grassroots efforts. Title IX was an excellent federal legislation that changed the industry of higher ed. In my personal opinion, it's going to take something like that to cause the institution of a higher ed, not just the institution of a higher ed, because it's not just a higher ed specific issue, it's a societal issue, obviously. It's going to take something like that for people on both sides to not be afraid to do some real change that needs to happen. So, that goes to my second point in that, we got to be careful on both sides, on the judging piece. Because, it's not just easy on either side to cross over that line, because there's too much at risk, with our lifestyles, our jobs, and what have you. So personally, in my opinion, it's going to take more than just grassroots efforts. These are just the signs of the times again. Unfortunately, we've gone back to the 60s or worse. But maybe federal legislation like that, just as Title IX, to affect the industry and make the change that needs to be made. Because I don't think, people are here because we want to learn. We want on both sides what needs to be done. And this is a great conversation, personally.
I just want to add to that. Office of Civil Rights is very interested because of some suits that have already been filed on how campuses should respond, how should we deal with YICAC as one example. I know it's a small piece, but the Department of Education and Ted Mitchell also has. We were at a convening in Chicago. They're way before the Missouri piece about everything we're talking about here. So I think there is some federal. That's not the only solution, but there is some federal interest in this and some concern about that, and largely because they look at the outcome. The outcome is we're graduating so fewer students of color at our institutions, and and what are the root causes of that? So I think there is some interest. Obviously, that's not going to solve the whole thing, but I just want to mention that.
Hi, my name is Elba. I work at Brandeis University Intercultural Center. So I've been sitting down and thinking and putting my thoughts into words. But I do have a question, and my philosophy has been preparing our students for life beyond Brandeis. And as a Latina, I face discrimination all the time. And we are thinking about our students while they're in college, but what about how to prepare them for when they graduate? And they're going our students of color are going to be facing discrimination in the job setting, wherever, and housing, So my question is what are your thoughts or advice about preparing, for me as a professional, as a young professional, where do I go from there? Because I keep it real. I tell them, you're gonna deal with this for the rest of your life, and but I want to support you while you're here. And
Oh yeah, sorry. Hi, I'm Jacinda I'm from MCPHS as well. One of the things I would say actually to that is keeping it real with students is good, and that's always been what I do with my students of color. And speaking truth to power as a Latina, I can tell people these are the things you'll face. But I think some of the more, giving them coping skills, giving them coping mechanisms, letting them know about counseling services, and that they shouldn't be afraid for utilizing those services, because too many people of color are taught that that's not something that they should do, and we can't air our dirty laundry. That is really important. But the other side of that is we need to be concerned about the white students, and you need to be concerned with, and I'm sure you are, but you need to be concerned with the white students and educating them so that when they go out into the world, they're not discriminating against these students when they go to apply for a loan or when they go to get a job somewhere. And that has been some of the most important work that Jesse and I and the bevy of people that are sitting here, and Rich as well, did or are still doing at Suffolk University. When you look at the data of the people that we train, or have trained, it's white, straight males. And those are the people, and everyone should be trained in diversity, of course, but those are the people we mostly had trained at Suffolk, and that was important work because we wanted those people to go out and be good humans in the world and not be people who discriminate against folks. So that's just a little bit of...
Right, and that goes back to the whole sexual assault thing, right? Let's not teach people how not to get raped. Let's teach people not to rape people. Let's not teach people how not to be victims of racism. Let's teach people not to be racist. Yeah. Right? I mean, what we're doing is and I do the same thing with my students of color. I'm like, guess what? You're going to experience this in any environment you're in. But the truth of the matter is that We're building, they're resilient, we know this, our students of color, they're resilient, they have grit, they're determined, they've been through a lot to even get into the doors of our institutions. And so they got it. They know that wherever they go, whatever they do, they're gonna have to have some sort of resiliency. But I think there's a lot of room on the other end to teach folks how to be inclusive, to not engage with systems of oppression, to not accept their privileges as unearned benefits. I mean, I think these are all things that we can be doing with our greater population and our faculty and staff.
I think it should not be lost from Jacinda's comment that much of the suffering from the students on the BC campus, and I think I can talk for many of your campuses, was not only the issues that they were responding to in terms of what they were seeing nationally, but the lack of caring from their white peer groups all across campus in terms of any of these things. I mean, really, you could just see the divergence between these two populations, and that added to the flame of that anger in such a deep way, because it was the people who they see every day, not coming out and marching with them, not caring about things, going on Yik Yak and putting these things out there to just add to that level of discomfort that's already there, and now really in fear for themselves, in fear for their ideas and what's going to happen after that. Any other last comment? Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Mari. I'm a graduate student at Merrimack College, and I also have a fellowship in the Office of First Experience and Education. I'm wondering how we can support students who are going home for Thanksgiving or any of the holidays who their families may not understand fully what's happening on college campuses. I know we're very well informed. We read the Chronicle, we read all those, but not everyone has access to the Chronicle. They're getting that 2-minute clip on whatever news station, and they see just that particular outlook on the situation. Like, how can we help our students feel supported going home and starting this conversation? Because this is a conversation that needs to be had with not just us, with people outside. And how do we help support our students facilitate that conversation?
I would say making sure our students understand the problem, right? Like, there's a lot of students who on our college campuses don't actually understand what the issues are that are leading students to protest, and you can see that if you read the social media posts. People are calling this complaining, people are calling this whining, people are calling this privilege and entitlement and reverse racism. And so until we really unpack and educate our students to make sure they actually understand what racism is and how it's operating in our society, then we're not educating anybody to have a discussion. And I think being really proactive about training our students in dialogue, and that's something Northeastern is actually doing really well. We're training our staff and faculty increasingly through Public Conversations Project on dialogue. And so skill-based education and all those things, in addition to the human-centered focus on people and remembering that students of color, even though they're resilient and have grit, are people and are not superhumans, they're not superheroes, and want to take off the capes.
Sometimes it's you need to motivate your students to have those conversations, because they might have that information, they might be educated, but they might be afraid of talking to parents, grandparents, that, you know, my parents are going to say, well, that college is changing you, and like, oh my God. I get it. I mean, I used to get it from my grandmother all the time. So, that education's changed the way you think about religion, for example. So I think you need to just encourage them and motivate them to be active members of the community, but just having those conversations. So some of them might be education, some might not be educated, but just trying to figure out where they are to be able to have those conversations is really, really important.
But also, if they want to unplug, they should at home, okay? They're going 10,000 miles an hour in their college setting, being students, maybe student athletes, student leaders, and now student activists. And so I know for me, home is a place where I feel comfortable, and I can be myself and unplug, and I think that's okay.
Siegel?
Yeah, quick comment. One is, I think should convene a second session like this at the conference if it's possible to fit it in, because there's just a lot going on and we could all benefit from it. But one thing I was struck by, my name is Mike Siegel, I direct the hiring program at Suffolk University, and in looking at one of the headlines that hunger striker brings down president, and I wanted to respond and say, there are millions of people out there starving for access and trying to get involved in this issue, and it's, as you pointed out, it's not just one incident. And I think we have to be careful too. As somebody who's studied college presidency for many years, we store a lot of power in the presidency, and presidents will tell you that they don't have a lot of day-to-day power, and and they have a lot of symbolic power. So when I talk to my students, I say, look, we can retrospectively look at connecting all the dots about what triggering events led to this, but one thing I always encourage new professionals to think about is that, you know, when we filter things through this one particular lens and we see issues happening on campus, it makes us blind to other areas. And so, you know, thinking about how we can isolate events and address them for what they are, but train our students as new professionals to think about what would this likely trigger in the future. So,
one more, Ken. As someone who's watched federal legislation over the years, I caution us to ask the feds to give us legislation to make people less racist. The feds in general are very clumsy with this sort of stuff. They are incoherent with it. Yeah, Title IX is like that. It's a very incoherent system of policies, laws, rules, regulations. They conflict each other. They're not the best practices for how you deal with this stuff, and they bludgeoned us with that. I'd hate to see something like that happen with this topic of this issue. I think it can undo a lot of civil rights legislation that's been very good for us all. I encourage us to do this. You know, certainly the feds can do what they're going to do, and they will probably, OCR will probably do something. But, you know, we should write to our rating agencies, U.S. News and World Report, Princeton Review, all those sorts of report card types of things, including the government's trying to do report cards. And what we've got to do is to say, please include as an index, please include as what your consideration is about how good an institution is how diverse it is, and how it handles these sorts of issues. Because you have to ask yourself, can you have a good neighborhood? Can you have a good institution if you don't have a good way to address this deep-seated problem on so many facets? So write to these people. Ask U.S. News and World Report to include 6 points towards diversity. They do it for alumni giving, they do it for graduation rates, they do it for all these other aspects of education, but they haven't done it for this aspect of education. It'll be novel, and it'll actually be a better incentive for our campuses to do the sorts of things that work on our campuses in terms of addressing this. And trust you me, it's a huge incentive. I know on my campus we will scramble like hell to make sure that we get those 6 points.
Thank you. So just in terms of wrapping up, you know, I think Mike's suggestion is carving out other time will be a good thing, and we'll start to look into that. And probably the biggest takeaway that I got from all of the information from the panelists and from all of you is knowing that when we get back to our campus, all of these wonderful proactive measures, that ship has sailed right now. Right? We are in reactionary mode. So we cannot go back to our campuses next week and figure out all of these relationships within a week to get to the type of outcomes that we want. So we got to think about those. We also have to think about what everybody's phone is doing right now, buzzing with stuff on your home campus right now with students who are trying to demonstrate. And I would say to all of you, how your intention handles that will then lead to the type of outcomes that will sow. Okay? So I want to say thank you to the panelists. Thank you all.